Hello and welcome. This is Code Files on Third Eye Africa TV. My name is Charles Agedo. You're welcome. Of course, Code Files is a program designed to keep us reminded of some of these cold case files lining up in our courts. And of course, in our last edition, you will recall that one of the cases, one of these prolonged cases, if you like, prolonged court order was the subject of our discussion, and that was the case order involving former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, talking about Sadiya Umar Farouk, I beg your pardon, who SERAP got a judgment to explain the rationale behind the 729 billion that was disbursed to over 24 million poor Nigerians, and the criteria adopted and the states and the beneficiary of that disbursement. And that case that order was given in 2024, and 2 years down the line, the order is not obeyed. And our contact with SERAP revealed that she actually appealed the order. And just recently again, the case between her and the EFCC resurfaced. EFCC, took her to court with respect to that same disbursement in 2024. And then that case somehow was laid to rest. But suddenly, just recently, she was supposed to appear in court, in the FCT High Court, but her absence led to the order by the court for her arrest. Who knows if this order, apart from the order that we talked about in our last edition, will be one of those orders that we've heard the court issued. And, court order in Nigeria is common, but obeying the court order is a different kettle of fish. And I usually don't do this alone. I have a guest with me, a special guest in the studio today, to continue the review of court orders in Nigeria and why court orders are mostly not obeyed, especially when it has to do with highly placed individuals. I'll be back after this short break to introduce my guests and delve into the conversation properly. According to a 2022 survey by the World Bank, about 63% of Nigerians, roughly 133 million people, are multidimensionally poor. Poverty remains significantly higher in rural areas, with 72%, than in the urban centers, with 42%, with the most severe levels recorded in northern Nigeria. Rising inflation and removal of fuel subsidies have further increased the cost of living, placing additional strain on households. Successive governments have introduced various initiatives to tackle poverty, but corruption continues to undermine these efforts, often overshadowing progress in addressing the crisis. In 2024, former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouk, was charged before Justice Dainde Dikbeolu of the Federal High Court in Lagos. The case followed a Freedom of Information suit filed by the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. In a landmark judgment, the court ordered Umar Farouk to account for the disbursement of 729 billion reportedly paid to 24.3 million poor Nigerians over 6 months in 2021. She was directed to provide a comprehensive list of beneficiaries, details of payments by state, and the selection criteria used. Justice Dikbeolu held that the former minister is obligated under the Freedom of Information Act to disclose such information. The court further directed her to explain the rationale behind the 5,000 naira monthly payment, which amounted to about 5% of Nigeria's 13.6 trillion naira 2021 budget. In a press statement after the judgment, SERAP Deputy Director Kolawole Oluwadare said the groundbreaking judgment was a victory for transparency and accountability in the spending of public funds, and that Justice Digboolu's judgment shows the urgent need for the Tinubu government to genuinely address the systemic allegations of corruption in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, and other ministries, departments and agencies, as documented by the Auditor General of the Federation, urged President Bola Tinubu to immediately obey the court order. Femi Falana described the judgment as one of the most patriotic public interest litigations ever undertaken in Nigeria, and called for the Tinubu government to use the judgment as the basis for comprehensively addressing cases of corruption in the ministry and bringing to justice those suspected to be responsible, as well as recovering proceeds of corruption. In the letter dated 6 July 2024 sent to President Bola Tinubu on the judgment and signed by SERAP Deputy Director Kolawole Oluwadare, it reads in part, "We urge you to direct the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development and the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation to immediately comply and release the spending details of the 729 billion as ordered by the court. The immediate enforcement and implementation of the judgment by your government will be a victory for the rule of law, transparency and accountability in the governance process and management of public resources, including the 729 billion. By immediately complying with the judgment, your government will be demonstrating to Nigerians that it is different from Buhari government, which persistently and brazenly defied the country's judiciary, and sending a powerful message to politicians and others that there will be no impunity for grand corruption. Immediately implementing the judgment will restore trust and confidence in the independence of Nigeria's judiciary. SERAP urges you to take a clean break with the past and take clear and decisive steps to demonstrate your commitment to the rule of law, transparency, and accountability in the governance processes. However, recent inquiries into the enforcement of the judgment reveals that the former minister has filed an appeal and no date has yet been fixed for its hearing at the appellate court. Welcome from that short break, and still Code Files on Third Eye Africa TV. And I have with me in the studio a special guest, like I said before, Abigail Zebulon. She's a legal practitioner, and you heard me say she. I'm so excited to have a she by my side today because I'm always bringing a he on the program, and this is just my second she on the program after several episodes. I'm most excited to have you in the studio with me, Abigail.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm happy to be here as well.
Thank you for coming, and I know lawyers with your busy schedule, and I want to appreciate your time with me today in the studio.
You're welcome.
So let's just go straight to the topic of today, which has to do with the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. And though we have begun this conversation with a different guest, talking about the court order that was given to SERAP in 2024, and subsequently the court order was not obeyed even before it was appealed. And even the case at the appeal, upon my inquiry with SERAP, there is no date for the hearing as we speak. So I want to quickly ask, why is court order not obeyed in Nigeria, especially when it involves highly placed individuals?
That's an excellent question, Charles. You see, a lot of people talk about court orders not being obeyed in Nigeria. But from a legal standpoint, it goes beyond obedience of court orders. You see, there are procedures in place for court orders to be followed through.
Okay.
We usually call it enforcement of judgments.
Okay.
These are procedures that, there's a mannerism for it. So even when a judgment has been given on your behalf, steps need to be taken to enforce that judgment. So maybe the question you should be asking is, what have SERAP done in place to see that that judgment is enforced? Have they filed the necessary applications to obtain the necessary judgments that they need for the order they got for it to be followed through?
Okay.
These are things that they need to apply. And then you say there is an appeal that has been done. And usually when a party files an appeal, they also file what we call stay of execution.
Okay.
Now, what this does to a judgment, it doesn't nullify the judgment itself, but it, however, does pause the enforcement of that judgment until the appeal has been heard and finalized. That way, the appeal, whatever is decided at the appeal, it doesn't just go to waste, or it won't be in vain, whereas maybe we never can tell how the appellate courts will decide. And so if there is a stay of execution, then that could mean that that judgment will not be enforced yet. So you might look at it that they are disobeying that court order, but we don't usually term it disobedience if the necessary application has not been done to enforce that judgment.
Okay, but for my investigation, and I think there was even a letter written to the president in 2024 with regards to that judgment, urging him to, enforce that, judgment, that it will also, help in kind of, painting his government in good light in terms of, because let me just read this. Not obeying court order actually is the hallmark of successive government in Nigeria. We all know that, But the question is, what is your assessment of this particular administration with respect to principles of separation of power and rule of law? Because a lot of people kind of feel that there is an interference between the executive and the, judiciary. Do you think there is, pass mark to this administration when it comes to separation of power and the principle of rule of law?
You said something I would like to address first, and that is a letter was written to the presidency for enforcement of that judgment.
Yes, by SERAP.
And sitting down from a legal perspective, I'm wondering why the letter to the president. There is a due process to be followed through in enforcing judgments. You can ask the president to intervene given his executive powers, but ordinarily, that is not the right procedure for enforcement of judgment. And that still brings us back to the fact that you see disobedience, but I see the legal bottlenecks that are there in enforcing court judgments. You also asked a very beautiful question about separation of power and how it, the rule of law, and how it works with enforcement of judgment. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you see, separation of power, yes, it does exist. It's a very important clause that is enshrined in the Constitution, where the legislative arm of the government, the executive arm of the government, and the judiciary, they are very well separated with different functions well outlined. It's a necessary rule of law because it helps ensure, that there is no subjugation of law. Everybody has its own power tussle and works within his or her own framework. So that's separation of power. It's a very beautiful clause we have in the Nigerian Constitution. You see, the judiciary are separate from the executive, and sometimes in the eyes of the public, they might tend to intermingle both of them. Just like you said earlier, a letter written to the executive on something that has to do with the judiciary. Now, while the executive are still involved when it comes to enforcing judgments, there is still a process that starts with the judiciary. First, you revert back to the judiciary to enforce your judgment before the executive arm of the government will be involved, where you're asking the president to intervene in a judgment of the court without following this due process. You see, Charles, that alone, you're already bridging the gap, or you're in not a good way between the executive and the judiciary. So the executive needs to work within the confines of the law, even where they are supposed to execute or enforce a judgment. They should follow due process, even the executive. So you cannot just write to anybody in the executive and say, come and enforce these judgments on my behalf. That's not how it works. That alone disobeys the separation of power, and it's against the rule of law.
What is your take in the fight against corruption by this present administration?
Okay. Well, you see, most times, still a little bit on the enforcement of judgments and the court orders. Yeah. Most times when there is a court order, maybe to release a certain individual, we'll see it play out more often than not. Okay. And then these individuals get rearrested. and then we look at it that, oh, that court order was not obeyed. But fortunately, however we may want to term it, the executive could still be acting within their powers. You see, the laws are laid out, and most times as persons, we try to stretch the ambits of the law to accommodate our excesses.
Okay.
And we see that happening, So when there is a fresh arrest made, they could be acting within the ambits of the law. We could have our reservation about it. So it's easy to obey this court order and then you rearrest on a separate charge. You see, they've acted within the ambits of the law. But when you look at it, you just see a court order has been disobeyed because this person has not been released. That's what we see. But from a legal point of view, we see it differently, that there is still a legal guard. There's still a legal guard that they are acting, and they are stretching it within its elastic limits. We may not agree with it, but the law is the law. Sometimes it acts in ways we don't approve of, but it doesn't change the fact that it's the law. So when it comes to the fight against corruption, the laws are there. The laws were not put in place by this administration or even the previous administration. I think they've been put in place over the years, and we see it running. We have institutions that have been set up to fight corruption. We have the EFCC, we have the ICPC, two giant agencies that are doing very well in their fight against corruption. Could more be done? Yes. However, they still need to work within the ambits of the law. They have the legal backing. But when it comes to implementation, sometimes there could be some backdrop, there could be some disadvantage. It's normal when it comes to the fight against corruption. After all, we all say when you're fighting corruption, it tends to fight you back, So it's a battle, it's a war, it's an ongoing battle continued by this administration, will be continued by the next administration. And instead, we could also find ways to empower these institutions that are fighting corruption. I think that's another angle that we can come in, and if these institutions are well empowered, we can see them perhaps winning the war. But when we tend to term this administration or that administration, I think the questions should be asked within the ambits of the institutions itself that are fighting the corruption, because the administration has not tampered with the legal backing of the institutions that are set in place. We see the institutions running their course and doing their thing. So how can we help them? How can they be better? How can they perform better? How can we get more results from these institutions? Let's look at it from that point of view, and I think we'll get more results.
Okay, so now talking about the institutions, do you think they do enough diligence when it comes to investigation before parading certain individuals before the cameras and taking them, charging them for all kinds of...
Well, you see, the powers that define these institutions are quite different. Like if you look at the ICPC and the EFCC, you see, they are, even though they have very similar functions, their modus operandi is usually different. Like the EFCC, that is being manned more often than not by senior police officers, and have police officers, once there is an arrest, they could make an announcement and all that. The ICPC, more often than not, is manned by those from the judiciary, from the judges and all, and that could also affect their modus operandi as well, because you see them in doing due investigation before even making an arrest. You understand? So that's, but irrespective of the way they operate, you see they still operate within the ambit of the law. They are still acting in line with the law that's created them. And so we might have our personal reservation about it, but is it lawful? Yes, it is.
Okay, so we cannot talk about these individuals allegedly involved in corruption without taking a look at what corruption is actually doing to us as a people. Now, according to the World Bank reports, over 100 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And to date, even after the disbursement of the 729 billion by the then Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, what is your, when I'm talking about your assessments against the, on the fight against corruption, rather, I'm trying to have you paint a picture of what you see when you go out there in terms of the well-being of Nigerians.
If you go back to the streets and you try to get a fresh survey done based on that your report, you see that things has gotten worse. Yes, it has gotten worse, not just in Nigeria, but on a global stage as well, it has gotten worse. Can we do better? Could something be done about it? In a way, yes, we can. We can do better. But what do we do? I think we have to turn back to the agencies involved and try to hold them more accountable in getting things properly disbursed where they need be. I think when funds are given for disbursement, there is usually there should be a laid out plan for how it should be disbursed. I believe so. I'm not privy to that information, but I believe there are set down plans for how funds should be disbursed. So those in charge of disbursing the funds need to disburse it appropriately. Where it is not done, then I think institutions like SERAP and all can try to hold these agencies accountable. And while holding them accountable, they still let the law play its part. If there is any foul intention or where there is any evidence of corruption, I am certain that the anti-corruption agencies will definitely do their jobs. I think that's why you're talking about the EFCC being involved and all that. I think that's them actually doing their job and seeing why these funds were not disbursed appropriately.
Yes, I think what I can say there is that the judge that was in charge of that case, after ruling, giving an order, I think order of mandamus, or what is called?
Mandamus,
that mandating the then minister, the former minister, to explain and the rationale behind the selection of these individuals, the states involved in this disbursement. And as at then, 2021, when that money was disbursed, the total amount of money was equivalent to 5% of Nigeria's budget as at that year. So now, if 5% of Nigeria's annual budget is said to be disbursed to 24.3 million households, and she's been asked to come and explain or account for how those monies were disbursed. And 2 years down the line, we just had the EFCC began another investigation of the same minister about a year ago. And just a few days back, an order was given again for her to be arrested. And as we speak, I don't have the update if she has been arrested or submitted to the security agencies as we speak. So my question is, the law is supposed to be fair, balanced, and the symbol of justice is a blindfold and with a scale. Does it mean that when it comes to highly placed individual, it takes like longer for this law to be effective than when it comes to the average Nigerian?
Charles, I get where your question is coming from, and it's not hard to see why. You know, these highly placed individuals, they are in the public eye, they are in public space, so we could see the trajectory of time, since 2024, and then nothing happened, and then 2025, and then it's
and there are numerous cases like that with the EFCC and the likes.
You know, the legal process, it could be cumbersome, it could be complex, but at the end of the day, justice is usually served. It may seem to delay, but it is not denied. And you know, because these individuals are in public spaces, you know when their cases begin and you're watching it up until the end. But more often than not, even in civil cases, even in our personal matters in court, we see litigation play out over the years, over a long period of time. And from the question you asked, you could follow the trajectory of there is progress being made. First, you talked about the EFCC's involvement. Perhaps you don't know, it could be the SERAP, this judgment in favor of SERAP that could have maybe a petition was sent over to EFCC.
Or the episode of the program that we did last time that, you know, woke them up, because I've discovered that some of these cases, once we pick them up, then you suddenly see the anti-graft agencies and the rest of them picking up from where, and that is part of why we are here, to remind them, to keep them on their toes, that these cases are not forgotten. Yeah, but we are just going to take a quick break at this moment. Then when we come back from this break, we are going to be turning our eyes on the judiciary, public perception about the judiciary. Like you just rightly mentioned, justice delayed is not justice denied. But in Nigeria, justice delayed could be justice denied. You agree with me on that?
No, I don't.
All right, when we come back, we'll find out whether you agree with me on that or not. In the past 20 minutes or thereabout, I have been having an interesting conversation with my guest in the studio here on Code Files, talking about Abigail Zebulon, who is a legal practitioner who has joined me to do an overview of one of the numerous unresolved cases in our courts today. And we have just done the first half of the show. If you have just joined us, you have not missed much. The second half is even going to be more interesting after this quick break. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
I report. Have you ever witnessed a crime or suspicious activity around you? Don't stay silent. Take action. You can now report crimes easily by sending videos to us on iReport. Record a video and a brief narration of the incident with the location and send to 0701 372 8007 on WhatsApp only. Your action could help save a life or stop a crime in progress. Stay alert, stay safe, be the voice, take a stand. I report only on Third Eye Africa.
Welcome back from that quick break. This is Code Files on Third Eye Africa TV, your #1 crime watch channel in Africa. We are here for investigative reporting and crime prevention and, of course, community safety. And this is your program, or your #1 program at this time. And my guest in the studio is still with me here, talking about Abigail Zebulon, who is a legal practitioner who has joined me to do an overview of one of the numerous unresolved cases in our courts today. Though this is not talking about one of the cases in court, we have numerous cases in court, but this is talking about numerous court orders. Just the same way we have numerous unresolved cases, we also have numerous court orders, unobeyed court orders, unobeyed with impunity. And we can authoritatively tell you that on this show that we have countless numbers of court orders upon court orders that was never obeyed in Nigeria as far as our democracy is concerned. And this calls to question the rule of law and justice in our country. You're welcome back to the show, Abigail.
Thank you, Charles.
It's been an interesting time with you, and I want us to just go straight to this second half of the program. I want to turn my attention to the sector you belong to, which is the justice sector. And you just told us that justice delayed is not justice denied. I want to believe so. But the question is, what is your opinion what is your opinion or the major challenges when it comes to justice delivery in Nigeria?
Justice delivery in Nigeria is not without its challenges. I think we all know about that.
Yeah.
Yes, there are some delays. Litigation process could be complex in Nigeria, but it's actually for a good cause. Nigeria operates an adversarial mode of offering litigation, and with that, it has to be compatible with the
presumption of innocence and all of that.
Yes. And also, you have to have a fair hearing. It's enshrined in the Constitution. So it means each party has to be heard adequately. Now, you see, what most parties do is to utilize this to their advantage, of course, at the cost of delays. So when you see matters up in court, you see a lot of interlocutory injunctions, and people are trying to buy time and to delay and frustrate matters. And this run over time. Sometimes it's not even from the judiciary itself. These are people just exercising and stretching their rights to be heard. And while we can say, okay, most of these injunctions should not be heard, there should be a way to bottle up these delays, but we don't want to do it at the expense of justice, at the expense of fair hearing, at the expense of being heard. And sometimes that is why it is allowed, so that when parties end up appealing, you see that most appeals are not, they don't go through, because you see the first court they had gone to, the High Court, did a very good job of hearing these matters. Is the delay there? Yes. But will the justice be granted? The answer is also yes.
Okay, now, do you think Nigerians still believe the judiciary to be the hope of the common man?
Oh, yes. A very big yes on that, Charles. You need to see thousands of cases that are filed every year. If people do not believe the judiciary has some sort of remedy to give, then we would not have those cases being filed on a continuous basis. That is why the courts are overburdened as it is, because everybody is filing a fresh charge. So people still believe that the judiciary could do something. And yes, it still works. People go to courts and they get their remedies fixed. They get their rights and their wronged rights corrected. So the judiciary is still the hope of the common man, and we are seeing it being exercised on a daily basis. Oh, new angles of the law are constantly being tested.
Are you speaking the mind of the common man out there, or you are giving your opinion?
I am a common man. I think I am a common man.
Come on. When you talk about the common man, were you one of those 24.3 million homes that received the 5,000 naira that was disbursed by the former Minister of Humanitarian?
I wasn't privileged to receive that. I wasn't privileged to receive that, Charles. I wasn't, but I believe we have more than 24 million families or homes in Nigeria. But I wasn't among the 24 million.
Yeah, because when you can't, if you are telling us that you are one of the common man out there, I wonder how our audience or our viewers would respond to that point you have just made. I will reserve my comments about that, you being one of the common Nigerians. But let me just come to this. Why I asked the question about the judiciary being the last hope of the common man, you agree with me that the Nigerian prison is one area that you don't want to talk about. Talking about congestion, talking about the dehumanization and the condition of living of some of these inmates across the correctional centers in the country today. And you want to ask, why is it that when it comes to the highly placed individuals, remanding them in prison custodies is always a matter of number of days, and they are brought to court and their bail condition is met and they are set free? But why the common man who probably got involved in purchasing maybe a stolen mobile phone, and his case never heard or even tried, but remained in these correctional centers for only God knows how long?
That is an issue, Charles. That is an issue. It's a pressing issue. We cannot deny that we have so many inmates awaiting trials for a good number of years, as unfortunate as the situation seemed to be. But you're comparing it with highly placed individuals. Striking the balance is where I'm trying to, because these placed individuals could afford their own attorneys and their own lawyers standing on their behalf. Whereas those who cannot afford an attorney, they need one granted to them by the state, and legal aid is already choked. They have so many inmates awaiting trials, seeking representation, and the representation is not adequate for them. So more could be done by the judiciary. I did say this, and maybe more lawyers should be involved in rendering legal aid and trying to get inmates out of the prison. But you cannot make that comparison with those not even highly placed individuals. There are some average individuals that could afford their own representation. So you don't see them spending this much time awaiting trials compared to those who cannot afford any representation. So this is not a privileged question. It doesn't apply to just highly placed individuals. An average person in Nigeria can afford a lawyer, and so he or she would not spend a long time awaiting trial. But more could be done to help those who cannot afford one.
Yeah, I'm happy you have mentioned the Legal Aid Council, because that is supposed to be standing in for those who cannot afford one.
Yes, and they do stand in. But like I said, it's a question of numbers. We have so many inmates awaiting trials. So many inmates need to be
so how did we get to that level of having so many? Because somebody just had probably a quarrel, or maybe a fight, or maybe a civil case that should ordinarily end at a certain level of the court. And at the end of the day, these cases are not even taken to court straight from because I was privileged to be in a gathering of a report recently organized by the Ministry of Interior, getting the feedback of the investigative panel that was set up to investigate the allegations around correctional centers across the country. And the reports we got from that investigative panel was heartbreaking. Because we had issues of people who have been in prisons for 9 years or more, and they don't have case files. We have issues of fake warrants, from courts. There is no a system that allows the prison to check if a warrant was signed by a certain judge. And we still have this manual process of taking paper from courts to the prison as a warrant. And we still have these allegations of warrants being signed in advance by judges. We have issues of, forged signatures of judges, to take prisoners to take suspects to prisons and all of that. So now the question is, how independent is the judiciary as we speak today? Because you rightly illustrated that they are supposed to be independent. The judiciary, the legislature, and the executive
They
arm
are
of
not
government.
supposed to be independent.
They are independent.
They are independent.
So now my question is the judiciary truly independent in Nigeria today?
Yes, the judiciary is independent. The questions, as beautiful as the question was, it was a bit mixed up. Your prologue was on the prison and most of the cases in prison, which is really appalling. It's sorry to hear, it's sorry to see. Should you go to the prison yards? It's a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah, because at the end of that report, the responsibility was thrown back at the various state attorney generals.
Now it still boils down to the executive. The prison, more often than not, it's regulated by the executive arm of government. So you asked me a very good question. However, your intro to that question was based off of executive functions. But I believe the question you're trying to ask is how independent is the judiciary, right?
That's on one hand.
Yes.
Yes. On the other hand, why I brought in the prison was connecting it with the judiciary being the hope of the common man.
Yes, the judiciary, you see, that's the thing with the judiciary.
Yeah, but can those people in correctional centers today see hope coming from the judiciary?
That's the thing with the judiciary.
Yeah.
You have to come to the judiciary.
So there are two-leg questions. I want you to address both of them.
Yes. You have to come to the judiciary. That's the thing. You want justice. You seek justice.
Yes, but for those who are already in detention, who are in detention as we speak.
Yes.
Awaiting trial.
And that's why I said...
they are awaiting trial that is never going to come.
Charles, and that's why I said, in as much as your question is beautiful, is directed at the wrong institution. That should be directed at the executive because they have the function of bringing these inmates before the judiciary. The police make the arrest and then they prosecute. You understand? The judiciary, you have to come to the judiciary. It will give you justice, but you have to come to it. So these inmates, it's a very sorry situation. They need to be taken, their trial needs to happen. The judiciary cannot be a judge in its own cause. It cannot be a party in its own cause as well. So they need to be taken before the judiciary, and then the judiciary determines their case. Until this happens, you cannot expect so much from the judiciary. They were sent
to remand from the courts, allegedly. It's just in some few cases that we discovered that some inmates were taken straight from the police station to the correctional centers, which is wrong. The cases were never heard. That is one of the findings. Then the ones that were ordered by a judge
to be remanded. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's the thing, Charles. We are speaking the same language. Now, a judge orders you to remand an inmate maybe for like 14 days, 7 days, 2 weeks. The executive follows through. Should the executive fail to follow through or do not follow sufficiently or overfollows the order, that's with the executive. So your question is right, is a challenge we are facing in the country. It needs to be addressed, but not by me. Okay. So you need someone from the executive arm of the government to address this issue because it's a legitimate issue. The judiciary works just fine. You just need to be before it. You know, they say you have to stand before the woman and then she will judge your case. If you're not before it, how does she help you out? So these inmates, yes, I know the executive needs to do more on that aspect, but you cannot use that standard to judge the workings of the judiciary. I think the judiciary is already overstretched as it is in dispensation of justice. They are really overstretched. You know, these judges, they have a whole workload of cases to decide upon, and you know, they need to be meticulous. They need to be meticulous to give fair hearing and, you know, also to have proper judgments. They need to. The judiciary is doing all it could. I think, but parties can do more. You know, for example, you started with the Sadiya's case, the former minister having corruption cases. The executive can do more speedily, like the EFCC conduct their investigation on time. There should be no too much delay. And then when they go to court and then, you know, try to avoid too many injunctions, too many other small proceedings that it's at the time. Sometimes you see parties will not appear when they are supposed to appear. The judiciary is already overstretched as it is. Can it do more? Yes. But I think the parties involved, they also have a role to play.
Because those injunctions, because some of those injunctions also have, the judiciary also have a role to play. When you have some injunctions and counter injunctions coming, in a case you really know that this ought not to be. You know, that is where, you know.
That's a dicey one, Mr. Charles. I know what you're asking me, but it's really dicey because the principle of fair hearing is enshrined in the Constitution.
Okay.
Parties need to be heard fairly. Parties need to be heard adequately. So if I am a party and then I want to buy time or waste the time of the court, of course, there are some rules in place now that try to limit these unnecessary hearings. Else before you would have a matter in court and there are some little injunctions that are already being had at the Court of Appeal. You know, the court has set, there are now some rules
with the
of
substantive case waiting.
Yes, but all these things have been curbed. So that is why I said the judiciary is doing all it can to see that these things, there is a stop to it. So now all those things that we have new rules of court that have tried to checkmate the excesses of parties that try to delay and buy so many times endlessly, that is being curtailed. The judiciary is already stretched. Can the judiciary do more? Yes, the judiciary, they're like now being all technologically inclined, use of AI technologies, so that there will be less paper writing, because you talked about remand rates being written on paper and then taken to the prison yard. So more funding should be given to judiciary so that everything is now more computerized. I know some courts are already implementing this, so you see some courts doing wonderfully well, but there should be a standard across the nation where all courts already are using ways of, you know, filing writs of summons and things like that. That would really help the judiciary.
Yes, I asked a question regarding corruption within the bench. I know you were trying to avoid that question because you didn't understand why I was asking the question. I wanted to ask if you are aware that there was a back and forth engagement between the EFCC chairman and the NBA president recently. The accusing finger that was being pointed by the EFCC chairman that some of these lawyers are also aiding and abetting some of these corrupt public office holders. And the NBA didn't find it funny and hit back at the EFCC on that. You know, but the issue is that when you have, there was a recent one between a lawyer that kept approaching a judge, and the judge was telling the lawyer to stay away from approaching her in the courtroom, you know. So, and stuff like that. What I want to ask is that, what is the anti-corruption committee within the NBA doing in trying to curb corrupt practices by some of these lawyers? And recently, you know, we had a very senior lawyer involved in a property that was said to be acquired in London by a certain former minister who is late now, Jeremiah Oseni, talking about the very revered senior advocate of Nigeria, Mike Ozekome. And you know what that did to the legal profession. So is there a way that sector can, because when you hear people, you know, talk in local parlance these days, somebody steals a pen from you or takes a pen from you, and the person wants you to laugh, tell you go to court. When you hear politicians tell their opponent go to court these days, what does that? How do you resonate? What does that resonate to you when you hear people
you
say
see,
go to court?
you raise yes. It seems like you're asking one question, but you have a lot of mini questions.
Yes,
what you're asking.
Yes, build into
so,
it.
yes. So you started with saying the former. You mentioned someone from EFCC. I can't remember who you said.
I talked
exactly.
about the EFCC accusing
the former chairman of EFCC.
No, the current chairman of EFCC.
Okay.
Pointing accusing finger at the NBA.
At the NBA, okay, yeah. So I wanted to address that first.
Lawyers getting involved in corruption, and they are the ones defending corrupt officials. The NBA got back at them, telling them to do their job. And he didn't find it funny. Of course, with good reasons. If I were the NBA president, I wouldn't find that funny too, because that's an allegation, and you don't make allegations like that without substantive evidence. That you are the ones defending them. We are the ones trying to.
No. That's not really a good way to look at it. You see, in the eyes of the law, it's innocent until proven guilty, whether we like it or not. Everyone is entitled to representation, irrespective of who you are, where you're from. We could complain about the common man, but the common man in the eyes of the law is not less or more important than highly placed individuals. The law places everyone on an equal pedestal. Yeah. So if you are saying that these individuals do not deserve representation, that is a statement that should, I think, I want to say maybe it was said in error, or it was misconstrued or misunderstood, because everyone deserves representation. In the eyes of the law, you are innocent until proven guilty. That is the law. As unfortunate as it is, or fortunate as it is, that's what the law says.
No, but do you agree that
let me say something about that burden of proof. It's enormous. Okay. It is enormous because you need to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt.
Okay.
And so, if you are an investigator from the executive arm of government, it means you need to do due diligence and you need to do your job well. Else, lawyers will do their job and they will find loopholes, and the person is off the case.
Yeah, because the business of a lawyer is looking for loopholes.
That is the law. It's not really. We are still operating within the ambit of the law. Okay. So, as the executive arm of government, you investigate properly. You do your due diligence. You take a person to court, and if the judge finds this person is guilty beyond reasonable doubt, such a person will be convicted. So, it's a question of doing your job. And let me tell you, where investigation is properly done, and you see an accused, the evidence is overwhelming before the judge, no matter how good you are a lawyer, it would weaken your case. Because, the law, it's not about speaking grammar before the court. The judge works with evidence. Yeah. The court works with evidence. You need to present your evidence. So it's a matter of who has superior evidence. Should the executive do their job properly, then no matter how good a lawyer can talk, and if you're the best orator, you cannot talk down proper evidence that has been submitted for the court. So you see, the NBA president, I don't know what he said or how he said it, but understanding what you're asking, he could have said, yes, the executive arm of the government needs to do his or her job properly. Then lawyers will only represent within the ambits of the law. Do you understand? That the executive should investigate properly. That's
okay,
what
so
I have to
do
say
you
on that.
believe that there is selective trial in Nigeria today, as we speak?
What do you mean by selective trial, Charles? Let me understand you.
Okay, take for instance, some people allegedly said that some of these corruption cases are meant to winch hunt or stifle opposition. Take Malam Nasir El-Rufai, for instance. Take Abubakar Malami, for instance. And take some other present 7 senators and former governors, that their cases have become some of these cold case files that we talked about today. Do you think justice is selective in our country today?
Well, that's a political question. And of course, I am no politician.
Yeah,
I am simply saying things from the ambit of the law. So if EFCC should get a petition, or the ICPC should get a petition, or even the police force, because yes, they could work with petitions. So if they receive a petition before them, for whoever or whatever cause, and they do their proper investigation, and then they find reasons to believe that an arrest should be made and there is a cause to investigate further and they do their job properly, then who am I to say it should be this or it shouldn't be that? I'm sure these officers, they work with investigations, they work with petitions, and when they receive these petitions, they go ahead to investigate and then make their arrest properly. So the question you're asking, it's coming from a political angle, and I am looking at things from a legal angle. Are they acting within the ambit of law? Are they well within their power and their legal rights to do this? Yes, they are. We could start saying, oh, I like this person, I wish it wasn't this person, or I wish it was some other person. But are they acting within the ambit of law? Yes, they are. And so who are we to question what has been stipulated by the law? We may not like it. We may not like it when the law it seems not to be working in our favor. We may not like it, I know, but it is the law and it's not selective. They have the power to investigate whoever, and when they choose to investigate whoever, that's the law for you.
Okay, so we have both agreed that there is slow pace in terms of justice dispensation in Nigeria. I think we have agreed on that. There a lot needs to be done in terms of justice delivery.
Well, Mr. Charles, I like to look at things from a positive angle. So could more be done? Yes, but I would not describe the judiciary as just being slow-paced, because then you take away the fact that it is done to ensure fair hearing.
Okay,
so
but we agree that a lot
could be done.
Needs to be done. So now, what are your recommendations with when it comes to justice dispensation in Nigeria? What would you want to look at in the nearest future?
Well, of course, more speedy dispensation of justice. That's the highlight of it all. I think if we can fix that in Nigeria for the judiciary, then the judiciary will solve like 99.9% of the judiciary's problem. We need more judges. We need more courts, and the judiciary they are doing quite a lot. Have you gone for a court sitting, see how these judges work?
We follow up with many of these cases.
Have you sat through some of these proceedings?
Yes, one of my observations is writing in longhand in this age of AI.
It's not easy.
That is one of the reasons for slow pace in hearing, because the judge has to listen and write every time, whether the prosecution counsel is taking the floor or the defense counsel is taking the floor. The judge is always, okay, could you please repeat yourself again?
You know what I would advocate for the judiciary? Probably adequate funding. They should be well funded. Because they are not even enjoying that as well. But if they have all the fundings they need to be all computerized, that is a very welcome and beautiful development. So the judiciary should get more funding to see that it's all computerized. This is a digital age already. The judiciary should catch up with the rest of the sectors, and this computerization, like I said earlier, I know some courts are already digital as it were, but there should be a standard for all courts in Nigeria to be digitalized already. So if they have more funding, I think the judiciary will do more than they are doing as it were, because even with the limited fundings, they are still doing enough. And you see the NJC today, they are made by very professional judiciary members, not really politicians, and so that helps buffer political interest in whatever the judiciary is doing. So I think they are doing well. With more funding, they would even do more than they're doing.
So you don't think there's interference with the judiciary by the executive?
In as much as we talk about separation of power, these powers are still linked up together. So are they separate? Yes. Are they still interrelated? Yes.
Are there interference?
Interference?
Yes.
They work together, but they work separately. When you say interference, you need to be specific.
When I mean by interference, do you think the executive in any way influences the decision or outcome of court cases in Nigeria?
No. Oh, no. Influence the decision of a case.
Okay, now when you are talking about funding, the funding of the judiciary is not that independent, because it still has a lot to do with the executive.
I agree with you on that.
Many are of the opinion that the judiciary should be completely
in terms of
independent in terms of funding. Because when you have a scenario where a city minister has to build houses for judges, give them luxury cars and all of that. When you have a certain interest, when you have when that minister have an interest in a certain case, what now becomes of
And
those
you see,
judges
this
that
still
were given
boils
houses
down
by
to the Constitution. In as much as there is separation of power, there is still overlapping powers, and these are all defined by the Constitution. So it's a constitutional issue, as it were.
So we should begin to move for some amendments in our constitution to enable.
Although I see how tricky that could get, because funding is more often than not controlled by the executive, not just for the judiciary, but every other arm of the government. The executive still signs these things to law. That is the executive power on its own. So these powers, even though they are separate, they still need to be intermingled, because at the end of the day, there are three arms of government: the legislative, the executive, the judiciary. But how many government do we have? One government. So I don't see how you would want to sever all ties between these three arms.
All right, I think we should just leave it at that at this moment. And I have had an interesting moment with a very brilliant lawyer with me in the studio today, Abigail Zebulon, who is a legal practitioner who has joined me to do, even if we're focusing on the court orders not being obeyed, but of course they are interconnected when it comes to justice delivery and justice dispensation and corruption and all of that in the country. And I think we've been able to, touch a bit of this and that as it connects to, justice dispensation. And I think I would like to have you again on this program in a very short time, because we have numerous issues, numerous cases, numerous unresolved cases in our courts that we need to keep dissecting and keep reminding and putting authorities on their toes to let them know that the media don't forget. Even if any other person forgets, the media must be there to, as the fourth estate of the realm. We have just talked about the three arms of government. We are the fourth when it comes to these three arms of government that you've just talked about, and that is why we are here to also, keep reminding them of these cases and these unresolved litigations here and there, in order to, have a better and a safer society. And I must thank you for your time today, for coming with me on the program to, do justice to some of these lingering issues in our courts today.
Thank you for having me too, Charles.
And I hope to bring you back in a very short time.
We'll see about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is where we'll be drawing the curtain on the program today. Code Files on Third Eye Africa TV will come your way again on this same station and same time. Until then, please remember, security is everyone's business. It's your business as much as it is my business here. If you see something, please say something. Don't forget to take advantage of our iReport platform. If you are in a safe place, whatever is going on around you, you can take a footage or a video or photo and send to us on our iReport platform. Be rest assured, as an investigative medium, we will follow up with that cases to see that justice is done. And until I come your way again, Code Files is the program, and Third Eye Africa is your #1 channel when it comes to crime fighting, crime prevention, and of course community safety. My name remains Charles Agedu.